Everyone, this is Zach Freeman. I'm making my first video for Run It Once, which I'm very excited to be doing. I've been enjoying the site for several months now as a member and really looking forward to having the chance to teach you guys how I think about poker and what I know. First, I'm going to give a little bit of personal background on myself. I learned poker playing live. I was playing live a lot before I ever played any online poker. I became a winner just moving up the stakes at as small as 1-2 no limit. Then I was grinding 2-5 no limit. By the time I reached 5-10 no limit and 5-10 PLO, I started taking some interest in playing online, and I deposited some money on there, and I didn't move down in stakes because I already had a bankroll, and I pretty quickly realized that I wasn't a winner at like 400 no limit and about those stakes, maybe 600 as well. So I dedicated myself to basically just to be beating those games, and it took a lot of work because I didn't really have great fundamentals. I was relying on just being really good at understanding the psychology of people, which is one of my strengths, the game flow and exploiting their tendencies, and also just the games that I was playing in were so soft that I was getting by with not being as good as I had to be. So, I put a lot of time into that, and then I became a pretty strong winner at mid stakes in no limit and PLO. And then some time passed, and I took some interest in the mixed games, and this was right before Black Friday, maybe about 3, 4, 5 months before Black Friday, and I decided that I wanted to get really good at mixed games. So again, I didn't drop down, which I should have probably, at least it would make more sense, but I started playing 25, 50, 10 game on full tilt, and I dropped about 30 buy-ins, which is probably, give or take, I lost about $30,000 in that time learning the games. I was hemorrhaging money at all the games I was new to, and my edge, although it was huge in those particular mixed games because the player pool was really soft, and the big bet games, it didn't make up for my deficiencies in all the other limit games and just games, non-flop games. So anyway, I put a lot of work into that as well, and got to the point where I'm pretty confident I was a winner in those games, and then Black Friday hit, so I didn't really have a chance to recoup any of those losses, unfortunately. But it was still very worthwhile because I'm back to playing about 99% live. I really only play online just because sometimes I just fiend playing online and I have a little bit of money on Bovada, etc. But basically, now it's really nice luxury to be able to play. I can walk into the casino if there's any mixed game going, being proficient in so many games, just good enough that even if it's not my strongest game, to be able to hop into it and have a big edge, it's a really nice luxury. It's not something that's as important online because you can just play your bread and butter game every day, and there's a lot more volume of games going on. So anyway, nowadays I play mostly 5-10 and 10-20, no limit, and also PLO, probably about an even mix. It just depends cyclically what games are best and what's running. And occasionally I'll play some high stakes private games where I'm most often have some kind of backing deal for those. I'll touch on my general approach to poker and what type of videos you can expect to see. Recently, I've made a commitment to learning the basics of game theory. And anytime you're studying something, I think it's really important to understand why you're doing it. The first type of player that you're going to want to use GTO strategy on is a unpredictable recreational player. Occasionally you're going to face very erratic players. Often they'll be fish, but they won't have any rhyme or reason to the plays they make. You'll even see some hands go to showdown where after you have all the information in front of you, you still can't pick up any significant read or any tendency that you can take advantage of. So against those type of players, your best bet is just to wait it out and just play your best approximation of GTO play until you have some kind of read that you can take advantage of. Also, against your occasional tough pro, you are going to want to play as close to GTO as you can, because firstly, you don't want to be exploited yourself, so you don't want to open yourself up to be taken advantage of. And likewise with the unpredictable recreational player, they probably won't have very many big leaks that you're going to identify that you're going to be able to take advantage of as well. Now, understanding what GTO play looks like is also really helpful for us to identify what exploitable tendencies are. For example, if in any flop game, let's say under the gun raises pre-flop and you call, and a flop comes down that shouldn't really hit their range very hard at all, and you start noticing that they're c-betting that flop just as much as they're c-betting flops that hit their range strongly. Well, if we didn't understand how their ranges interact with different flops and what probably a ideal betting frequency would be, then we wouldn't know that that's actually something that we can take advantage of. And on those flops that miss them a lot, we can start bluff raising them and trying to exploit their tendency of over c-betting. Now, it also defines our baseline strategy, so we can more accurately create exploitative adjustments. And what that means is, I think it's important to understand that our baseline strategy is always going to be GTO, but our goal should always be to take advantage of any read we have, even if it's insignificant, as long as we trust that read. So without knowing what our baseline strategy should be, we won't be able to make an accurate adjustment to take advantage of the reads we have. And the last point about a advantage of understanding what GTO play looks like is it helps us gauge how far we're deviating from GTO. And why that's important is it allows us to see how exploitable we are. And often that's going to be in the form of, for instance, let's say we have an opponent where we are very confident they're under bluffing. But if we start getting to the point where we're folding the very top of our range, we have to be very careful, and we have to have a really high confidence in our read. And the reason for that is because otherwise we could be making a huge mistake by folding if we ended up being wrong with our read. So it's just important to understand how exploitable we're being. If you end up deeming the optimal strategy to be GTO, you're probably either not paying enough attention or you're in a really bad game. And the reason is because even the very best players have many exploitable tendencies. Phil Galfond, who we all assumingly see as an excellent player, otherwise we wouldn't be here, he would be the first to admit that he has plenty of exploitable strategies that he employs. And my opinion is the absolute poker beast, the absolute perfect player, maximally exploits those he has reads on. He plays GTO versus those he has no reads on. And he also portrays strategies that he does not employ. And that's what I strive to do. That last statement is really, it means that he wants to portray that he's, let's say that he's playing GTO, when in fact he's actually playing very exploitable, because that inhibits somebody from making an adjustment to counter-exploit him. My videos will simply show how I play and how I think about poker. I think there will be a big array of what games I'll be presenting It'll mostly be on PLO and No Limit Hold'em, but I'll also form it on any requests that I get. And most of my videos will focus on solid deductive reasoning. So basically going with the information we have, putting it all together and using it in a practical form of how to play poker. And that's going to be in the form of a lot of gameplay review, some concept videos, some basic theory, and I will look forward to getting some input on what you guys want to see. So let's move on to the topic of today, PLO8, and some not so obvious characteristics of the game. Firstly, PLO8 is a very pre-flop intensive game, not only for just the equities, but also the playability. I want to first illustrate these two sims and just show how important the ace is in PLO8. I'm not going to go into extremely basic things about the game, like how to read boards and things like that, but I think this really hammers this comparison really hammers the point of how strong the ace is in this game. So here on the left, on the upper left, we have I ran equities of any single ace with 3 random side cards versus deuce 3 4 5 double suited, which contains the best possible low without an ace, connectivity, and double suitedness. And you can see just a random ace is actually a favorite over that hand. Now, I ran the same sim against probably I would assume it's the strongest possible hand without an ace, and it's king king deuce 3 double suited. And you can see that just a random ace has 46% equity against that hand. So basically that just makes it very clear that almost every strong hand in this game is going to contain an ace. Now I put the next equity comparison. It shows that PLO8 is a little bit more pre-flop intensive than PLO. And I show that by illustrating that ace ace deuce 3 double suited, which is the strongest hand in PLO8, versus a random hand has 72.5% equity, whereas in PLO high, ace ace jack 10 double suited, the strongest hand in PLO high, has only 70.6% equity against a random hand. Now, that 2% equity difference isn't huge, but it's really amplified by some playability issues. The playability of most hands in PLO8 is dependent on their pre-flop strength to a big deal. And most runouts, the board is static for the low. And what that means is once a low is possible, on most board runouts for, let's say, there's a possible low on the flop, on most board runouts for turn and river, the nut low isn't going to change. And even if it does, there's spots where you can have an uncounterfeitable low, and in that case, you're going to always finish the hand with the nut low. Now, what that means is the nut, and sometimes the second nut low, as long as you've established that your opponent doesn't have better, can barrel with impunity. And the realization of equity, or R in Lefferts' videos, is really low for non-nut hands due to the nut low's ability to bet multiple streets on the majority of runouts. An example of this difficulty of realizing equity is, let's say, for example, we have a hand like king queen 5 deuce versus our opponent's unknown range. Flop comes down queen 5 3 rainbow, and we apparently flop quite well with top 2 pair. We end up check calling, and the turn's a 7 of diamonds, putting a backdoor flush draw out. Well, that wasn't one of the worst cards for us, but we still now have a precarious spot because any